Meanwhile, the Democratic nominee taking a page from the Trump playbook, punching back in real time, going on a tweet storm. Here's the first one he sent out. The only person responsible for our failed COVID response is Donald Trump. It's complete. You see with a graph video and another one saying it didn't have to be this bad. Now, coming up tonight, the theme, Land of Opportunity. We'll hear from the First Lady, Melania Trump. We'll hear from Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, a first for a sitting Secretary of State to address the RNC convention, and we'll hear from more members of the Trump family, his son Eric and daughter Tiffany, and Florida's Attorney General, former Attorney General Pam Bondi. Guys?
Quite a lineup there. Griff, thank you.
Night one of the RNC directly countering the Democratic message. So what were the major takeaways?
Joining us now to discuss from the Young Americans for Liberty, Kristen Tate, and Democratic strategist Laura Fink. Thank you all for being here. We appreciate it.
Thanks for having us.
Laura gets her camera situated there. Kristen, I'll start with you. What was your takeaway from last night?
Well, the DNC last week really set a low bar, and the Republicans showed up prepared and ready to actually start this election. Last week, the DNC focused on kind of portraying Biden as this nice, empathetic guy. The RNC did not spend the whole time focused on Donald Trump last night. They focused on those issues that are most important to voters. What is this country going to look like after the election? They had some great speakers. Everyone brought something kind of unique to the table, but there was definitely a common thread throughout those speeches, which was the portrayal of a stark contrast of two different visions for this country. One is a country where you can have the freedom to work at a job you love and provide for your family, live in a safe community and be proud of your country. The other is a country where political correctness is prioritized over safety and security, where cops are being defunded, and where our history is literally being torn down. I thought Tim Scott was the star of the night. I love how he mentioned George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, and COVID right at the beginning of his speech. And he said, our country will get through these hard times by embracing the American journey, not by, socialism and empowering bureaucrats in D.C.
Laura, what was your big takeaway from night one?
Well, if last night were a blues album, it would be entitled Venom and Rage, the venom directed at the Democrats, and rage, an undercurrent of anger throughout. I read the previews. I saw President Trump talking about this being about being uplifting, but I didn't see a lot of that in the speakers. I saw a lot of anger, and I also saw a lot of denial. You wouldn't even know we were in a pandemic with 30 million people unemployed to look at this lineup, because it wasn't just unbridled optimism. It was darkness. It was the American carnage that President Trump talked about in his inauguration speech, and it was radical socialism. If you were a suburban woman that was a swing voter, you were told that the suburbs were going to be abolished and that they were going to move people in that didn't look like you into apartments. It was all fire and brimstone and not a lot other than red meat for the
Laura,
base.
if I could follow up, isn't that fear, though, somewhat justified based upon what we are seeing currently in our Democrat-run cities, with the Democrats not really saying anything about it at their convention?
Well, I think that you would like it to be about that. But if you look at all the polling and what do Americans care about right now? They care about their health. They care about the pandemic. They care about getting back to work. They care about making sure that America gives them a job that keeps a roof over their head, food on the table, and have their kids safely back in school. Not a lot of that talked about last night. I don't think Americans even rate this idea that the cities are being pillaged and Rome is burning. It's an exaggeration. And I don't really think it plucks at the heartstrings of where swing voters say that voted for President Trump in 2016 and are taking a long look at Joe Biden are at.
I don't know if that's exactly fair to say, Laura. And Kristen, I'll give you the final word here. But just to follow up on that, I mean, we have seen crime rate statistics prove it in major cities across this country that have increased tremendously over the course of the last year, especially the last few months. We're seeing what's happening in Wisconsin right now. We're seeing those videos of vehicles being burned to a crisp. Take a look at your screen right now. I mean, Kristen, this isn't stuff that's being made up. This is happening in our cities.
Yeah, my fellow panelists may not think that these, descriptions of the cities literally burning are exaggerated. If she lived in Portland or in Wisconsin or in Chicago, if her business were being burned to the ground by angry mobs. Last night was not about Donald Trump or Joe Biden. This election is about two vastly different paths for this country. We need to celebrate America, what makes this country truly great, our values, our nation's history. And the Democrats, they want to plunge our nation into socialism. We're going to see probably more riots.
Fear.
All right.
We're going to see more of this lawlessness.
We got to leave it there, ladies. But way to get us off to a really hot and heavy start. Good stuff, Laura Fink, Kristen Tate. We appreciate your time this morning. And like I said, we're just getting started.
Thank you. And now let's talk more a little bit about what we just referenced and go to this Fox News alert, because overnight, hundreds of angry protesters were setting buildings and cars on fire, as you see it right here, clashing with police for the second straight night in Kenosha, Wisconsin. Yeah,
this unrest following the police shooting of a black man. Jackie Ibanez joins us live as the National Guard tries to curb the violence. Jackie.
Good morning, Todd and Jillian. Chaos on the streets of Kenosha as demonstrators break a citywide curfew and storm the courthouse. Check it out.
Good, brother. Be careful. Be careful. Be careful. Be careful.
There it is. Protesters seen launching fireworks and throwing water bottles at officers. Fires burning across the city, including at a Wisconsin Department of Corrections building. Look at that. A furniture store also completely engulfed. A garbage truck also torched near the courthouse. Police and the National Guard firing tear gas to break up the crowd there. Kenosha becoming the latest flashpoint of unrest after videos surfaced of police shooting this 29-year-old. He's Jacob Blake as he was getting into his car. Blake's family says he is in stable condition and, quote, it's a miracle he's alive. Officers say he had a knife, but witnesses say they did not see one.
I heard them telling him drop the knife. When I was recording and looking at the same time, I didn't see a knife. I was looking at his hands when they said drop the knife. I'm like, does he have a knife? I didn't see one.
At a news conference surrounded by protesters there, the Attorney General wouldn't comment if Blake was armed. The mayor says there may not be a lot of video of the incident.
The police department does not have body cameras at this time. It's scheduled in 2022 to purchase a body cameras. It's been in the budget for a while. And it's part of the issue has been in dealing with the states.
The shooting sparking protests across the nation overnight, including New York City, San Diego, Chicago, and Minneapolis. The curfew in Kenosha will remain in effect until 7 o'clock this morning Central Time. There is no word if another curfew will be put in place tonight. Of course, we'll keep an eye on that. Todd, Jillian.
Okay, Jackie, thank you very much.
Another major story we are following.
This is the place where history is made.
Today, Tropical Storm Laura expected to strengthen into a major hurricane when it approaches the coast of Texas and Louisiana.
The threat looming in the Gulf as Marco weakens into a tropical depression after making landfall near the mouth of the Mississippi River.
Saw it right there, a powerful lightning strike hitting Panama Beach, Marco causing flooding in many parts of Florida.
Residents getting last-minute supplies before Laura makes landfall. Senior meteorologist Janice Dean joins us live. She has been tracking its every move. Good morning, Janice.
Yep, good morning. So good news, Marco is weakening, just an area, a depression, an area of low pressure that's bringing a little bit of rain away from the center of the storm across portions of Mississippi and Alabama. Here is Laura, though. This is the real deal. We think this could potentially become a major hurricane in the next 24 to 48 hours and affect Texas and Louisiana. There's the latest track. We'll get a new track at 5 a.m. and we'll bring you the latest, but 110 miles per hour. That's close to a Category 3. That would be a major hurricane. So that's a big deal. That's why we have hurricane watches in effect from Galveston towards Morgan City, Louisiana. So Louisiana is going to take a 1-2 punch from true tropical systems in just a matter of a couple of days. There's your future radar. With this, certainly the potential for heavy rain. Storm surge is going to be an issue. This is going to be a big storm, a major storm, and it's going to affect Texas and Louisiana Wednesday into Thursday. So we will be watching Laura. That's the big deal. Probably our first major hurricane of the season as we get this system into the Gulf of Mexico. Back to you, Todd and Jillian. keep you up to date.
A lot more on this throughout the course of the morning, especially when that 5 a.m. update comes in. Janice, thank you.
And staying on top of our Fox News alert, explosive protests in Wisconsin over the police shooting of a black man.
Former NYPD Lieutenant Dr. Darren Porcher says rioting will not solve anything. He joins us.
We are back with this Fox News alert. Protests in Kenosha, Wisconsin turning violent for a second night as rioters set cars and buildings on fire, attacking police and defying curfew.
The National Guard now moving in after the officer-involved shooting of Jacob Blake. Joining us now with his take, former NYPD Lieutenant Dr. Darren Porcher. Dr. Porcher, it's always a pleasure to have you. Obviously, the investigation is ongoing, but what key facts stand out to you?
The same token, an active investigation is moving forward. Therefore, we need cooler heads to remain calm until we get the outcome as to what happens. But once again, right.
The facts until we perhaps see if any other video comes out, what other information comes out. We'd be careful about that. However, that being said, Dr. Porcher, we are seeing those, protests out there, the fires being set to buildings, to cars, the same thing that we've seen in other cities across the country, especially after the death of George Floyd. I guess my question is, how do we get to a place where we can have these investigations go on, we can have people take accountability if and when that is necessary, without destroying all of our cities?
This is a time where we need our elected officials to sow the seeds of calm. The governor has put out inflammatory statements that in many cases, I believe, has propelled these rioters to commit to the acts of anarchy. We need to sit down and let calmer heads prevail. Granted, this is an unfortunate situation, but we have to understand the wheels of justice need to act accordingly. When we look at what happened with the death of George Floyd, we clearly saw the officers were arrested and charged as a result. As a result of looking back at what happened with George Floyd, we need to apply the same standard to this particular case. And what's necessary is society moving forward in a progressive manner. We are losing billions of dollars in connection with these riots, and it's doing us no good. We are clearly experiencing a recession as a result. Therefore, this is the time for us to gain the momentum of going in the right direction as opposed to going in the wrong direction, as we see that's happening in Wisconsin.
All right. Dr. Darren Porcher, as always, a pleasure having you on, especially during these tough moments in our lives that we're seeing day in and day out on our screens. Dr. Darren Porcher, thank you. Still ahead, the armed couple who protected their home from protesters takes center stage at the Republican convention.
Not a single person in the out-of-control mob you saw at our house was charged with a crime. But you know who was? We were.
They're warning to families if Democrats win in November. We're coming right back.
Obama and Biden let North Korea threaten America. Obama and Biden let Iran get away with murder. President Trump did the right thing and ripped up the Iran nuclear deal. He's tough on China, and he took on ISIS and won. With his leadership, we did what Barack Obama and Joe Biden refused to do, and we stood against our enemies.
Former UN Ambassador Nikki Haley giving a resounding endorsement of the president's foreign policy and offering sharp criticism of his predecessors. So what should voters keep in mind about President Trump's stance on the world stage, and how does Joe Biden stack up? Joining me now to weigh in, former CIA station chief Dan Hoffman. Dan, great to have you here. Point blank, Dan, are the American people safer under the foreign policy of Donald J. Trump or the foreign policy of Joe Biden?
Well, I think that's certainly a question that voters will be asking. And I think when it comes to Iran, if you look at the failed JCPOA agreement, which Democrats did not support. The reason why it was never became a treaty is because senators like Chuck Schumer did not support that deal. I think we're seeing some consensus building that it was the right move to pull out of that deal, especially after this historic agreement between Israel and the UAE to normalize relations, which is really, for us, another quiver in the Trump administration's maximum pressure arrow against Iran.
Dan, let's talk more about that deal. Here's Secretary of State Mike Pompeo on the Israel-UAE deal. Take a listen.
I'm very hopeful that we will see other Arab nations join in this. The opportunity for them to work alongside, to recognize the state of Israel, and to work alongside them will not only increase Middle East stability, but improve the lives in each of for the people of their own countries as well.
Dan, why should every single American care about what Mike Pompeo is doing right now?
You know, he's overseas mounting a diplomatic full-court press, and I just think that's such an important thing for all of us to remember. While the politicians are doing the politics here in the United States, which is fine, during the convention, he's been in Israel. Yesterday, he was reportedly meeting with the British foreign minister, and he's on his way to Bahrain and Sudan. He's building a diplomatic coalition against Iran, and again, that's a seismic shift in the Middle East, and it does make us safer in the United States. Iran has sought outreach with China and Russia. They're hurting from our imposition of economic sanctions. Their economy is in free fall. But at the same time, they remain a grave threat. You know, they're enriching uranium, tripled their stockpile of enriched uranium over the last year, and they're practicing nuclear brinkmanship. And I think the region recognizes that they are a threat, and that's why we saw that peace deal, again, a diplomatic, historic triumph, I think, for this administration.
Wish we had more time to go over China, North Korea, and, of course, like you mentioned, Russia. But we'll just have to have you back, because obviously there's a lot more on the world stage to get to. Dan Hoffman, we appreciate it as always.
Thanks.
Okay. Jillian.
It is 26 minutes after the hour. Democrats grill the Postmaster General during a tense hearing on Capitol Hill.
How can one person screw this up in just a few weeks?
I'm concerned about your understanding of this agency.
I am not engaged in sabotaging the election.
Kentucky Congressman James Comer was there.
We continue with this Fox News alert. Protesters launching fireworks and water bottles at police during a second night of violence in Kenosha, Wisconsin. The unrest following the shooting of a black man, Jacob Blake. He is right now in stable condition.
Buildings and vehicles torched as rioters break a citywide curfew overnight. A Department of Corrections building and furniture store completely engulfed in flames. The governor deploying the National Guard to curb the violence. The curfew will remain in effect until 7 a.m. Central Time. And now to this, in a stark contrast from the Democratic National Convention, delegates allowed on the floor to listen to President Trump and Vice President Mike Pence speak at the RNC.
Our own Griff Jenkins was there and spoke to the vice president exclusively before he took the stage. And Griff joins us now. Griff, what did you guys discuss?
Hey, Todd and Jillian, it was remarkable access, and we thank the Vice President for letting us get that behind-the-scenes look. The Vice President talked about the contrast between last week, which was a referendum on Donald Trump, to this week, which the Vice President says is a choice. Listen. When you compare the message of what's coming this week to what we saw in Delaware last week, how do you see it differing?
I think the choice in this election is clear. The American people are going to see a great contrast. You have President Trump, who said that we're not going to shut this economy down again. And to hear Joe Biden actually talking about shutting down our country again just shows how out of step he is with the progress that we've all made as a country. I know Joe Biden last week said the democracy is on the ballot. Well, President Trump and I believe that the economy is on the ballot, the future of this country is on the ballot, law and order is on the ballot, and we're going to take that case to the American people.
What is going to be the message from the administration this week about how we get the situation in the streets under control?
From the first day of this administration, President Trump and I have stood with the men and women of law enforcement, and we always will. And the violence that's ensued in cities across the nation is unacceptable. And the fact that Joe Biden, in his acceptance speech, spoke not a word about the violence is just really astonishing.
Have you given any consideration to running in 2024 for president?
All of my focus is on getting this president reelected for 4 more years. This is not just the most important election of our lifetime, but I actually think it's one of the most important elections in the life of this nation.
You didn't say no, by the way, to my question about 2024. I note that. He didn't rule it out. So who knows where we'll be in 4 years from now. The vice president also taking head on Biden's comment about shutting the country down if he is elected. It was quite an interview, and we will hear from the vice president tomorrow night from Baltimore's Fort McHenry. We expect him to talk a lot about, in that speech, about what he just talked to us about yesterday on the ground in Charlotte. We will be there live for you at Fort McHenry tomorrow morning. Todd, Jillian?
Yeah, great question, Griff, on 2024. Obviously, the focus right now is 2020, but after the speeches of Senator Scott yesterday and Nikki Haley, you have to be thinking those three, Pence, Scott, and Haley, going to be in the running for 2024. But we've got 4 years to do.
Yeah, I don't know where we're going to be in 4 minutes, let alone 4 years, Griff. Thank you. All right, Postmaster General Louis DeJoy shoots down the left's accusation that he slowed down service to sabotage the election as President Trump resumes his attacks on Democrats pushing mail-in voting.
The Postal Service is fully capable and committed to delivering the nation's ballots securely and on time. This sacred duty is my #1 priority.
80 million mail-in ballots that they're working on. It's not going to be possible to tabulate, in my opinion. If a scam, they'll blame it on the post office.
Ranking House Oversight Member Congressman James Comer says Democrats' Postal Service concerns are, quote, manufactured distractions. He joins us now. Congressman, why do you say that? Why do you call them manufactured distractions?
Well, because the Postmaster General just debunked everything the Democrats have been saying for the last week. The Postal Service can handle the ballots. The Postal Service has the capacity. The Postal Service has plenty of money to operate into for the next 11 months. So all the claims that the Democrats made that the Postal Service is trying to slow down the mail, that the Postal Service cannot handle the increased volume, they were totally debunked by the Postmaster General yesterday.
Let's go ahead and take a listen to what Nancy Pelosi has to say.
We take an oath to protect and defend the Constitution from all enemies, foreign and domestic. And sadly, the domestic enemies to our voting system and our honoring our Constitution are right at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue with their allies.
Is that fair?
It's not fair. It's very unfortunate that the Speaker would say something that bad, call Republicans domestic enemies. She is way off base. I hope the American people are watching. We do not need to continue to vote to keep Nancy Pelosi as Speaker of the House. This whole majority has spent their entire 2 years as majority in doing nothing but their focus on trying to destroy the president. They have no agenda. They have no vision for the future. Their whole policy, their whole organization is held together by their obsession with their hatred towards the president.
Congressman, the Democrats are really pushing vote by mail this year. But so far, at least in the primaries, it has not gone well. Take a look at these numbers. over 558,000 mail-in ballots rejected during the presidential primaries, which we know, not a lot of people turn out for primaries. And compare that to the general election just 4 years ago, just 318,000. If the rest of the nation votes by mail in the upcoming general election, will you trust the results?
Well, that's the problem. The problem is not the Postal Service. The problem is the mail-in ballots. Now, we support absentee ballots. That's where registered voters call and request a ballot. But what the Democrats are wanting to do is universal voting, where these states, especially the Democrat states, especially the Democrat swing states, they mail out ballots to everyone on the voter rolls. And we all know that the voter rolls are wrong. There are a lot of names on the voter rolls that shouldn't be there. People that have passed away, people that have moved, people that have changed names. So we have a problem in America with the voter rolls, and the Democrats have been trying to spin this, especially for the last week, that the problem is with the Postal Service. We've seen in the states, just in New York with Chairwoman Maloney's race, it took 6 weeks to count the ballots, and they threw out 12,000 ballots. She only won by a little over 1,000 ballots. So we have a problem with ballots, and those problems are in the Democrat states.
Okay, let's talk about this for a second real quick. Second Amendment rights taking center stage last night, the first night of the RNC. The St. Louis couple, Mark and Patricia McCloskey, who we've spoken about at length, they had their guns outside of their home when there were protesters who had broken through a gate in their neighborhood back in June. What did you think of this last night?
I thought they did a great job. It's a great issue, and it's a big contrast between the parties. The Republican Party stands strong for the Second Amendment. The Republican Party believes that people like that should be able to defend their private property, to defend their family with guns, whereas the Democrats want to abolish guns. The Democrats don't think any law-abiding American should be able to protect their home. And I think that that's going to be a huge issue this fall, and I hope that the American people are paying attention.
A lot more on their address to the RNC last night. Congressman James Comer, we appreciate your time this morning. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you for having me.
Of course. To extreme weather now. Tropical storm Laura expected to become a hurricane today as it heads toward the Gulf Coast.
This as Marco soaks the region overnight after weakening to a tropical depression.
Caroline Shively is live in New Orleans with how Welcome back. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo is on his way to Sudan following talks in Israel during his Middle East tour. It's to promote the Trump administration's push for diplomacy between Israel and Arab states. This following the historic UAE peace deal.
Trey Ying's live for us in Tel Aviv as Pompeo urges the international community to put pressure on Iran. Trey, good morning.
Todd, Jillian, good morning. U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo will arrive in Sudan today as part of this multi-country tour. He's scheduled to land in just a few minutes. This trip part of a multi-country trip that will also include Bahrain to promote the administration's peace deal forged between Israel and the UAE. Pompeo in Sudan will discuss the possibility of normalizing ties with Israel ahead of the U.S. elections in November. Now, remember, the U.S. Secretary of State was at the UN last week where he triggered a sanctions snapback on Iran for their violations of the 2015 nuclear deal. He took an opportunity after his meeting with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu yesterday to slam others for not supporting the pressure on Tehran. The chief of the International Atomic Energy Agency is in Iran today to try and gain access to 2 key nuclear sites for inspectors who do suspect further violations with Iran's nuclear program. In the coming days, President Trump's son-in-law and senior advisor Jared Kushner will also visit the region for peace talks. Now, the U.S. attempt to try to convince more Arab states to normalize ties with Israel is not going over well with the Palestinians, who say these states are going against long-standing agreements. That's something to keep an eye on. Also tonight, Secretary Pompeo will address the RNC. He recorded a speech last night in Jerusalem. Expect him to discuss the administration's pressure on Tehran. Todd, Jillian.
All right, Trey, thank you.
Actor and staunch Trump supporter Jon Voight bringing some star power to kick off the RNC.
We chose a different path. A man who is not a politician. A man who cares. A man who loves America and all Americans. A man who works tirelessly for you.
Carly Shimkus with Fox News Headlines 24/7 Sirius XM 115 here to break down the night. Good morning.
Hey, yeah, good morning, guys. You could probably count the number of Hollywood actors who consider themselves proud, outspoken Trump supporters on one hand, and Jon Voight is really chief among them. This intro video was very well done, heavy on the patriotic imagery, and painted President Trump as the one person who could lead the country into full economic recovery. Also took shots at Democrats, accusing them of fanning the flames of lawlessness. Jon Voight also just has a really good voice for narration, which is why some folks at home, like Michael on Twitter, said he felt like he was watching a movie. So night one in the books, on to night two, and who knows, maybe another nifty intro video. We'll have to wait and see.
We will see. From the RNC to the DNC, we now have the numbers on the DNC, and it looks like a party divided.
Yeah, so looking back to last week, Democrats and the Biden campaign worked really hard to paint a unified message at the DNC, but the numbers are in, and over 1,000 delegates voted against the party platform. And it is considered one of the most progressive party platforms of all time, but it doesn't specifically endorse Medicare for All or the Green New Deal. It was a big deal when Rashida Tlaib came out and said that she wasn't going to support the platform, but clearly she was not the only person to do that. 1,119 Sanders delegates, and that is about the same as the delegates who voted against the party platform. So while they are painting a message where moderates and progressives in the party are unified, the party platform delegate count paints a very different picture, guys.
It'll be interesting to see how this develops over the course of the next 2 months, because I feel like there's unrest still as we continue to plow along here on election 2020. Carly Shimkus,
absolutely.
We appreciate it.
All right, see you guys. And still ahead, a cancer survivor thanking President Trump for the right to try.
They didn't give me the right to try experimental treatments, Mr. President. You did. And without you, I'd have died waiting for them to be approved.
Natalie Harp says the president's policy saved her life. She joins us next.
They didn't give me the right to try experimental treatments, Mr. President. You did. And without you, I'd have died waiting for them to be approved. You have used your strength to make America strong again. You risked everything to make America safe again. It's a wonderful life.
Trump 2020 Advisory Board member Natalie Harp shares her personal story on the right to try. And after delivering that very powerful speech, Natalie joins me now to discuss. Thank you so much for being here. We appreciate it.
Great to be with you, Jillian.
Your speech was so powerful. For those who are watching and don't know, tell us your story.
Yeah, the president saved my life with the Right to Try Act because, I'd failed the different chemotherapies that were on the market and no one really wanted me in their clinical trials. I was going to make them look bad. And it's like everyone now knows what that feels like with the coronavirus, where we've been waiting for a cure. And it's like it's only been a few months we've been waiting. The president has been cutting so much red tape. I mean, even with convalescent plasma this week, by expediting treatments safely so that people who don't have the luxury of waiting, like me, can actually try these treatments right away. For my cancer, I was able to try an experimental treatment, and thanks to him, I'm alive. And a lot of people have the same story as me, thanks to the president being our patient advocate, really the first patient advocate we've ever had as president.
Natalie, was there ever a point in time where you gave up hope?
Well, when no one else is fighting for you, you do kind of feel all alone. And it was like when the president was fighting for you. I mean, people with terminal illnesses, they're on nobody's short list, But on the president's short list, we are. So it was an incredible thing when, everyone's giving up on you, and then you see the president take on something that, there's no guarantees in life, but he's like, I'm going to fight for you. It's like he believes if, the odds aren't looking good, you can beat the odds. And that's the approach he takes to healthcare, which is so different than socialized medicine. I mean, when you look at Charlie Gard, what happened in the UK, where it's like his parents wanted him to have the right to try experimental medications, and that government health system said, no, you know what? It's too dangerous, which he was going to die if he didn't try anything, and it's too expensive. But here in America, it's like we have the right to try those treatments if we want to. Some people may not want to. I wanted to, and the president gave me that right, and that's what we have, and that's really what's at stake in this election, because if Joe Biden were to win, we're not going to be able to vote on health care again, because we're going to be into socialized medicine. I mean, whatever he says, when you look at it, everybody's going to lose their health care based on what he he and Kamala Harris want to do. Bernie Sanders is running the party. It's going to be socialized medicine.
Well, you're leading me exactly into my next question, and maybe you can go into this a little more, is, for a lot of people in this country right now, and rightfully so, coronavirus is on the top of their mind when they're thinking about the election. The economy is on the top of their mind. But why should this be as well?
Well, I mean, it's like when you look at it, healthcare affects everyone regardless of whatever political party you're in. And I mean, I'm in California, so it's like your politics are kind of decided for you. I mean, you vote on election day and it's like it's already predetermined it's going to be Democrats. But for the first time, I actually had a representative in Washington and the president fighting for us. And I mean, everyone sees that. It's been bipartisan. It's been moving all of America to help with the coronavirus. The president is a nonpartisan. I mean, that's why he got into this. He's a businessman. Politics doesn't matter. People matter. And that's what's so important in this election, because with Joe Biden, it's all about politics. I mean, look at it. Look at Bernie Sanders, AOC. All they care about, they say healthcare is a human right. But what's that right to? I live in California. The only rights they gave me here was marijuana, opioids, and the right to die with dignity. It took President Trump giving me the right to try experimental medications. And I think healthcare, everybody realizes your whole life shuts down when your health's bad. And you want to be able to make those personal health decisions for yourself with your doctor. You don't want government getting in the way and telling you what you can or cannot do. And that's really what's at stake in this election, because with socialized medicine, the government's going to decide whether or not you get treatment, whether or not you see a doctor. I mean, we saw what happened with the VA even before President Trump reformed it. People were dying on wait lists. They couldn't see a doctor. That's what's going to happen if you crash the system and throw everyone into a system, and it's going to be survival of the fittest. And people with pre-existing conditions, we're going to be the first to go.
Well, Natalie, your story is definitely a powerful one. We certainly appreciate you sharing it with us. I know it's early and you were up late last night, but we really appreciate you being here. Natalie Harp, thank you.
Thank you, Jillian.
Yep, Todd.
Great job, Jillian. Coming up in the next hour, Fox and Friends First, an American city in flames as riots are up following the shooting of Jacob Blake. HUD Secretary Ben Carson reacting to the unrest ravaging American cities.
This is the place where history is made, legacies are cemented, and America's decision begins to take shape.
The Democrats had their turn. Now it's the Republicans who will take the national spotlight.
Fox News is bringing you Democracy 2020 coverage you can't get anywhere else, with can't-miss analysis all night, breaking down the key moments from every major event and the opinion America turns to for answers. It all continues tonight at 6 p.m. Eastern.
Special coverage of the...
A Fox News alert. A second night of chaos in Kenosha, Wisconsin. Hundreds of protesters torching cars, shooting fireworks at officers as outrage mounts over the police shooting of Jacob Blake. A live report on the unrest.
Republicans roar to the forefront of the 2020 race. The party striking an optimistic tone on night one of the RNC. Their pitch for President Trump as the best choice for America's future.
We seek a nation that rises together, not falls apart in anarchy and anger.
There are millions of families seeking to live the American dream. Supporting the Republican ticket gives you the best chance of making that dream a reality.
And a very good morning. You are watching Fox and Friends First on this Tuesday morning. I'm Jillian Mealy.
Great to be with you as always, Jillian. I am Todd Pyro. Thank you for starting your day with us. Some of the biggest names in the Republican Party making the case for President Trump as the pro-America candidate on the first night of the RNC.
Griff Jenkins is live outside the Mellon Auditorium in Washington, D.C. with the major moments. Good morning, Griff.
Good morning, Jillian and Todd. One very visible difference from last week, the RNC kicking off their convention with in-person delegates. It's trimmed down from the larger number it would have been, but there were some 300 on hand. And when President Trump came to thank them for the renomination, they went pretty crazy. Watch.
I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart. You're incredible warriors. You have incredible strength. We have to win. This is the most important election in the history of our country. Our country is counting on it.
And while the president is his own best spokesman, his son, Don Jr., making the case for his father, highlighting the administration's strongest issue, the economy.
Trump's policies have been like rocket fuel to the economy, and especially to the middle class. Biden has promised to take that money back out of your pocket and keep it in the swamp. That makes sense, though, considering Joe Biden is basically the Loch Ness Monster of the swamp.
The first night lineup also included a number of GOP stars, including former U.S. Ambassador to the UN, Nikki Haley.
Last time, Joe's boss was Obama. This time, it would be Pelosi, Sanders, and the squad. Their vision for America is socialism. Joe Biden and the socialist left would be a disaster for our economy.
In South Carolina, Senator Tim Scott raising the issue of race and Joe Biden's record versus his actions.
Joe Biden said if a black man didn't vote for him, he wasn't truly black. And while his words are one thing, his actions take it to a whole new level. Look at what he already did and what he didn't do while he's been in Washington for 47 years.
Meanwhile, Joe Biden taking a page from the Trump playbook, punching back in real time, going on a tweet storm, saying the only person responsible for our failed COVID response is Donald Trump, and then saying at Donald Trump, it didn't happen to be this bad, had a graph you see with it. Now, coming up tonight, it's Land of Opportunity is the second night theme. You're going to hear from the First Lady, Melania, along with the Eric Trump, his son and daughter, Tiffany, and Secretary of State Mike Pompeo will address the RNC. First time a sitting Secretary of State has ever done so, along with several others. Todd, Jillian?
Looking forward to it, Griff. Thank you very much, and looking forward to your piece on Mr. Vice President Mike Pence and your little gathering all day. We appreciate that as well.
Thanks, Griff. Okay, we watched top Republicans call out Democrats for their cultural revolution and move towards socialism. But does a Biden-Harris presidency truly pose a threat to the American way of life?
RNC Senior Communication Advisor of Black Media Affairs, Paris Dennard, joins us now with his answer. Paris, busy night for you. We appreciate you getting up early with us after a late night for you. Do you think the message of Tim Scott and Nikki Haley that a Biden-Harris presidency would be dangerous for America really resonated with those voters that are still undecided?
I think it did, and thank you for having me on the show this morning. I think it connected with those independent, free-thinking voters because they don't want to hear a depressing view of America. What they want to hear are the facts. They want to hear what this president has done and understand the contrast between the two policies and the two action initiatives of that of Joe Biden and President Trump. And when laid out with the facts, like we heard last night from Ambassador Haley and from Senator Scott and others on the stage, they are able to connect in a way that Americans appreciate because they gave it with true passion, personal story, and with facts. And that is what the independent, free-thinking voter wants to know. What exactly did President Trump do? And how has his policies impacted me? And what would it be like under a Biden administration? That was artfully articulated last night.
Let's talk about Georgia State Representative Vernon Jones here for a second. Lifelong Democrat, as you know,
right.
Making the case for Republicans as the party for everyone. Take a listen to what he had to say.
Sure.
But I have news for Joe Biden. We are free. We are free people with free minds. And I'm part of a large and growing segment of the black community who are independent thinkers, and we believe that Donald Trump is the